Hi everyone, I'll give it a couple of minutes for people to come in because I thought let's have a general chat about stuff, about the whole situation we have going on at the moment. And so we'll have a chat about Social Security, what it is, what it's for, and the way it's being bastardised and privatised, because I think it's important to do a refresher on this. I might get sick of the trolls who are very ignorant. So you guys know I'm on here and I'm on TikTok. TikTok gets a lot of trolls that come on and basically troll us the way that the trolls used to troll us a few years ago on here. Get a job, this, that and all the other. Which drives me nuts. It shows the level of ignorance that's still out there. But what pains me is the level of narcissism shown by fellow Australians towards each other in regards to what people think other people should be put through, right, on the grounds of my tax dollars, etc. So I thought we'd have a bit of a chat. Social Security, what is it and what its purpose is? It's in the name. Social, society, security, all right? That's where, by providing income for people who don't have an income, or top up income for people who don't have enough income, or people who can't work, right, provides security to the rest of the community in regards to keeping crime down, because people aren't going to be breaking into your house for food. Right? It's supposed to support people into housing, which is not, it's failing dismally thanks to this government, since the Howard government and now this government is making damn sure that payments are not of a subsistable livable income. Right? So the general idea and where it comes from was pre-World War II, we didn't have Social Security as such. And when the Depression hit, the middle class collapsed with the lower classes, leaving the high class up there and the corporations all safe. But everybody else was living in the streets, living in slums, didn't have access to medical, didn't have access to food, was lined up at soup kitchens, and people and children were dying in their thousands from starvation and poverty, what are known as poverty diseases. You know what I mean? And without adequate medical and hygiene, and treated like dirt. After World War II, most Western countries decided we didn't want to do that anymore. It wasn't a good idea to return back to the way it was before World War II, where you had soldiers coming home with nowhere to live. No income, no access to medical, right, and dying all over again, and their kids and their families struggling. So the welfare state was born. Right, but not only as a welfare state as such, but to provide social security for small businesses, because they worked out if people have got money to spend in the community, they spend it in their local businesses. That keeps people employed. That generates more employment. That employs more people. It's a circle. Okay? So by giving people money in this hand, they spend it on this hand, and in this case today, people spend it on paying off someone else's mortgage, okay, because they can't get one for themselves, so they pay rent, which in turn is paying off somebody else's mortgage, right? They pay electricity, they pay telephone, they pay internet. All of those companies have staff, they get paid, right? They go to their local food works, their supermarkets, their little stores, their markets, right? Everybody receives somebody else's Social Security money. They don't get to hatch it in the Cayman Islands and save it all up. And they don't get any tax relief on it like our multi-millionaires and our billionaires that are in the fossil fuel industry who don't pay their fuel excises and they don't pay certain taxes, okay? So today I got a post banned on TikTok because it mentioned the fact that I was having this argument about taxes and with somebody, and I video replied to the person and reminded them that Clive Palmer and Gina Reinhardt and Twiggy Forrest don't pay excise taxes on fuel or gas. But little old me on a DSP does, and somebody on youth allowance or job seeker or any of the payments do. We still pay our taxes. We are, we don't get, we may get some concessions depending on what state you're in, right? But we don't get tax-free services. We pay our taxes, all right? So to keep this banging on from the trolls that we don't contribute, that we don't pay taxes, is a load of rubbish. What people need to understand is $169 billion a year that is spent on the Social Security and welfare budget, administration costs. In those costs are things like Serena Rosso, max employment, right? All of the companies that run the assessing of people on disability support pension, all of the privatised sector, the Serco workers, okay? All of those costs come out of that budget, as well as the money that's paid out to people on payments. But how much money goes back to revenue for the government off that spend? Roughly around about $750 billion a year is returned back to the government. They're outlaying $169 billion a year. They're getting $750 billion a year back. That's not a bad profit, is it? Yet I get tired of people, and I have to remind people, and like I did during the card fight in 2017 in Hinkler, when the Chamber of Commerce leader in Maryborough jumped up and down about people leaving Hervey Bay to move to Maryborough, called them welfare immigrants. And I slammed him and I said, so what, Social Security dollars aren't good enough in your businesses in Maryborough? You know what I mean? Is that what he was saying? That he didn't want the businesses in Maryborough to be able to accept welfare dollars? Look, I don't think any ordinary small business cares where the dollars come from that comes through their front door. Every dollar that comes through their front door pays the wages of their staff and their bills and their insurances and their taxes. Right? That's what it's designed to do. Without it, the whole lot collapses and we go back to pre-1929. And I get sick of the people that don't understand the basic economic stabiliser of this country is Social Security. All right? It has been nibbled at, it is being turned into a punitive system. People are being penalised for receiving it. Now, the next thing that really gets me is the criminalisation. Being treated like you're a criminal for receiving something that isn't a legal payment, that if you're deemed eligible for that payment, then no one should be turning around and saying you're a bludger or you're a rorter. You've already been deemed eligible by the government to receive that payment. It is your legal income in law. Unless you're on a cashier's debit card, then it's 80% of its indu's income all of a sudden, and you're left with 20%. I'm just thought we'd have this bit of a chat because I get tired of the ignorant trolls that come through my platform on a daily basis. They don't understand tax, they don't understand Social Security, they don't know what it does for the country. They just believe the Johnny Howard and LNP rhetoric that everybody on a payment is bad. Everybody on a payment is drunk or an alcoholic or drug addict or treats their kids bad or doesn't do this or doesn't do that or is incompetent, is bad. But if you remove that $169 billion a year, of which about, I'm not sure exactly how much of that is actual Social Security payments, right, from the economy, I wonder how long it'll last before they all start whinging there's no dollars going through their businesses. When people like me can't go around the corner here and go to the bakery or go to the food works or once a fortnight go to my little carvery here and get myself a roast dinner. Times that by how many people in our communities? And I'm only speaking 3 businesses there. I spend most of my shopping money at Fresh and Save because I get a better deal there. A little bit of it I have to spend in Coles because I hate it. We have Coles, Woolies and Fresh and Save. I've never worked out the products in Aldi's. I don't recognise their brands, so I don't go into Aldi's myself, right? But even so, Fresh and Save is a South Australian company anyway, so that's an Australian company. That's good. right? But the others are multinationals. This is where the cashless debit card is dangerous for our economy. By funneling money, social security money, that is supposed to circulate within our economy and return that revenue profit back to our government to be used for other services. Instead, 80% of somebody's income is being funneled out through multinational companies, which aren't really putting it back into the community the way that it would normally go when somebody's got the freedom of choice as to where to spend it and use it. See, even when somebody goes and buys something privately off somebody else second-hand, right, the government's getting a bit titchy there because they want to be able to tax that transaction. But when you buy second-hand goods, those goods have already been taxed. Depending on how old the item was, they've had the luxury of 14%, 22% or 32% sales tax on that item. Right? If it's in the last 20 years, they've had GST on that item. Somebody goes to buy it second-hand, the government is getting angsty because they can't double tax it. That's why they're trying to push all this sort of stuff as well. They want to be able to double tax everything. We're very good at tax on tax on tax in this country. And the government's very, very good at division and putting Australian against Australian continuously. And what frustrates me is we've actually got people in our community who believe in this rubbish. And when they come out with their support for something like a cashless debit card that is financial abuse, right, or they don't believe in social security, and when I see that and some of the fervour that they have with it and how they're so fixed on it, what they're saying, and I wish they had the balls to just say it outright, is that they would gladly see the neighbour next door's children starve. They would like to see them kicked out of their house. They would like to see them unalived. Because when you turn around and tell somebody you don't believe in social security, you shouldn't have that, or you resent them having the money to feed their kids and pay their bills, what you're saying is you resenting them being alive. Where did we get to? How did we get here? We lost the Aussie mateship. How did we get to the point where Australians don't give a shit about other Australians? Right? Tell me. Because it's really sad. It wasn't always like this. When I came to this country, unemployed people weren't treated like this. Mind you, the unemployment rate was 2%. And we had lots of jobs before the neoliberal private market stepped in and decided, no, we don't need telecom anymore. We'll privatise to Telstra. Or we didn't need ETSA anymore in South Australia. We'll privatise all the electricity grids. Or we'll just sell off this and we'll sell off that. And we'll privatise that and we'll privatise that. And with it, all the jobs go. And we'll shut down all the manufacturing and everybody leaves to go overseas because they can still get their taxes sorted out. All right? They don't have to pay the taxes, but they can still have the companies set up overseas. And it's one great big tax dodge. All right? So, I mean, it's disgusting what's been done to this country since 1975, basically. But more so since the Howard government and now what's happened since Abbott, Turnbull and especially Morrison. Now, remember Morrison, under the Abbott government, was the Social Services Minister. Okay? Who do you think, and he went and had a lovely little meeting with a guy called Ian Duncan Smith in England. Where do you think he got all the ideas for cutting social security, for changing all the rules, for all the mutual obligations, and just recently the same thing with wanting people on the NDIS to have like 6 monthly reassessments to make sure they're still disabled. Things like that. That all comes from the Tories. Morrison picked up the whole lot while he was over there. He learned it all. Well, it hasn't worked out very well for people in the UK. People with disabilities, over 200,000 dead. Right? You have 4 million people in abject poverty. You have got thousands of kids going hungry. They've cut their school meals. See, a lot of people don't understand here. Like Dan Andrews brought in Breakfast Club, or expanded Breakfast Club in Victoria, but he's also brought in hot lunches, cooked meals for schools. I grew up in a country that had that as part of normality. It wasn't welfare. It wasn't a handout. It was part of going to school. School had 2 sittings, 12 o'clock and 12:30, and you walked into the main hall and the tables were all set up and the cooks were all there with a big kitchen, and you had a 3-course meal. You had a little entree, you had a cooked meal, and you had a little dessert, and you had a jug of water in front of you. That was normal where I come from. It's normal throughout most of the Northern Hemisphere and throughout Europe as well. But people pick on Dan Andrews, but they don't realise. And people go, oh, school lunches, oh, why can't parents supply that? And the idea is not about, it's about making life easier for people. It's about civilised society, looking after a civilised society. Do you know what I mean? So when they tried to, when they introduced the cashless debit card into Hinkler, one of the first things they did was attack the Breakfast Club. It was the only time I've ever seen a Breakfast Club program attacked as being something negative and something that only people on welfare use it. No, many workers drop their kids off at Breakfast Club on the way to work because they know they're going to get breakfast, but it is a social inclusion tool because a lot of kids suffer, like my daughter did, social anxiety, where they have trouble getting into school, and if they were late, the anxiety would get even worse because when they walk through the door, the whole class is looking at them and they freak out. I was encouraged when I was in South Australia for my daughter to go to Breakfast Club, and I said to the school, but why? I've got buckets full of cereal here. She can have toast, jam, cereal, porridge, whatever she wants. That wasn't what it was about. What it was about was social inclusion. Go to Breakfast Club, meet up with your mates, get some breakfast, and walk into class together. Right? Inclusion. And it didn't matter whether the parents were working or not. It was inclusive for all students. But Keith Pitt and his merry men up in Hinkler, oh no, no, no. It was disappointing to see that program be completely trashed with lies. First it was 100 hungry children, then it was 1,000 starving children that the school shouldn't be feeding. Well, ironically, I lived in South Australia over a decade ago, but all the high schools in South Australia provide Breakfast Club for kids. Do you know what I mean? And if a kid didn't have lunch, they'd provide them a cheese sandwich for lunch and an apple. Because, and the parents might be asked to chip in $1 towards the cost of that. But in Queensland or in cashless debit card areas, no. Programs like that promote inclusiveness and are non-judgmental, are not based on your class, right, are bad things and have to be used in a negative way in the media to get support for such a negative program as the cashless debit card. And another place where the Breakfast Club was actually cancelled was Coolgardie in WA. And one of the first statements we got out of that community was, we're starving. Because of the stuff-ups with the cashless debit card, people cannot use their cashless debit card at Coolgardie's IGA to buy food, and their Breakfast Club was gone for their kids. That is cruel. That's what the LNP do. Right? People have a go at me. They can't tell the difference between federal policies, and they have a go at me about Dan Andrews all the time and the mandates and this and that. And it's like, well, back up. Go and look at what Dan Andrews is actually doing for your state, for public housing, for schools, right? Putting in the right air filtration units in your schools to try and help combat against COVID. All right, school lunches, school breakfasts, clubs, supports for parents, everything. All right, back up, people. Go and have a look at how good you've got it. All right, people need to go and check out how good they've got it. In South Australia, all schools have reverse cycle split system, air conditioning, heating and cooling. All right, until I came to Queensland, I'd never heard of paying for reams of paper, having to pay for printing and stuff like that, and walking into a classroom and seeing no air conditioning, just fans and open windows, was like stepping into the dark ages. It's getting there slowly, but you see the federal government keeps cutting the funding to the state government to allow what they can do. But with the cashless debit card and the negative around it, it has the ability to cause a lot of damage, and its supporters do my head in. They really do. I think that's the main point I wanted to make. People on the cashless debit card, yeah, there might be a few people out there that might have a criminal history for crimes that they've been to court for and been judged in a court of law. But the majority won't, okay? It is not a crime to receive or apply for social security payments, disability, aged care, parenting payments, carers payments, off study, ab study. It's not a crime, right? Yet the supporters treat people as criminals for claiming something that is their legal right to claim under Australian law for being an Australian citizen. We need to protect social security because the LNP will dwindle it down. People like Pauline Hanson will keep pushing for their welfare reforms, which means cutting people off under the age of 25 and only 6 months benefits for those over the age of 25, right? And making it impossible for people on disabilities to be able to get access to a disability support pension altogether. Their focus is trying to get people to work for the dole, work for the dole, work for the dole. So the latest little incantation out of Anne Ruston's mouth is, make people work for the dole to fill in the blanks from the people that are off sick from COVID. Woolies would love that. They would love it so much. They do it in England. In England, their version of work for the dole, workfare, people work 40 hours a week in the supermarkets, stocking the shelves and on the checkout, and then after work, they've got to run off to the food bank to get food because they don't get enough in benefits, £73 a week or so, to be able to feed their family. But they stand there from 8 in the morning till 5 at night, processing every other person's food, hungry. That's happening a lot. And there's so many food banks in England, it's ridiculous, all right? But you've got your universal credit over there where working parents are struggling in poverty and having to use food banks as well. But the supermarkets and the big businesses love workfare or work for the dole because they don't have to pay award wages. They don't have to pay superannuation. In England, they don't have to pay the national health insurance. They don't have to pay. They don't have to look after workers' rights and work cover protections. They get free labour from these people. Anne Ruston wants to do the same here. Remember, working on work cover 6 months of the year, work for the dole, right? 6 months of the year, 25 hours a week, and it's compulsory unless you can find other volunteer work or studying an approved course, right? You are working for no award wages, yet you're replacing an award-waged worker. You're doing the labour of a worker but not getting paid for that labour properly. You're not covered by work cover, so if you have an accident or an injury, you're not covered. All right? And there was a guy that was really seriously injured on a work for the dole site. He will never work again. The spinal surgeries that he's had to have, and he can't walk, but he can't claim the disability support pension either. Right? No compensation for his injury, stuck on job seeker, trying to save up monies for his surgeries and his rehab by himself. It is disgusting. I can see Woolies and Coles chomping at the bit. Now, I can't remember how long ago it was. I did see something where Woolies were already taking in little groups of people as like interns for work for the dole type thing and getting away with that on a little scale. But can you imagine work for the dole? Oh, you need to go and do that shelf stacking. But you can't get paid wages. Or it's, well, you go to that job or you lose your payments. Because even though they say they're mutual obligations, there's nothing mutual about it. All the obligations are on the person who's working, or not working, the person who's on the benefit, who's trying to get a proper job. We need to change the language in this country, and we need to Stop this. It's rorting of people. Do you know what I mean? It is disgustingly abusing people and using them all the time. This country's GDP relies on 10% of this country's GDP comes from volunteer labour. 10% of our GDP is generated through the people working for no wages. Isn't that disgusting? This country would fall over if every volunteer walked out and said, I'm not doing it anymore. They'd only have to do it for a week, maybe not even that. All right? Then you would really find where people are being used. And I would encourage people to do that, but the only place I'd encourage them not to do it is in the healthcare system. Right? If you're a volunteer in the healthcare system and Meals on Wheels, please don't let the elderly starve and don't leave you. But they're using people in aged care. They're using people in the healthcare sector. They use volunteers for everything. Everything. And it's not fair. I have no problem with people who want to volunteer to do stuff. But in my world, if you came and volunteered with me, you would get paid your transport cost and you would get paid for lunch, or you would have lunch and food provided. Same with work for the dole, should provide food for people, because people can't always afford the transport to get to their work for the dole. I know they tried to send my daughter to something that was on the bloody Gold Coast or something, Ipswich, and she lives in Brisbane. It was ridiculous, and I told her, go back to Serena Rosso and say, no, you can't afford $90. To go to Ipswich, I think it was $24 a day in train fare. You know, to go to this whatever work for the dole course it was. And I told my daughter to go back to Serena Rosso and say, no, you can't do it. You can't afford it. On youth allowance, you just can't afford to spend that kind of money. What are you supposed to do, take it out of your rent? You know? And they ended up putting her into some course thing that was in her own suburb that she could walk to. But she had to push for it. You know? There's too much abuse in the system towards people. People on Social Security are not all bad people. Majority of people on Social Security at the moment have worked a lifetime, raised children, are in their 50s and 60s, worn out, broken, can't get disability supports, can't get in-home care supports, can't get help, and are languishing on job seeker and becoming homeless. More and more older women in my group are giving up rentals or being pushed out of rentals and having to try and find room shares or caravan on a friend's block. And yet there's one lady I've been talking to on TikTok, and she was professional all of her life. You know, but because she hasn't been able to work for a while, she's lost everything. And you know, it's a disgusting situation we've got happening here, and Aussies need to understand, where's the mateship gone? Now, this last fortnight, where I live, went underwater. I watched the town pull together to try and save this town from going underwater. All right, I watched my council and all of the services made up of volunteers, many which would be on job seeker or on disability or whatever, roll into action to try and help people. And it was a fantastic community effort. And I actually felt part of the community, even though I was actually cut off for 3 days. Couldn't go one way, couldn't go another, just had to sit in my house. And the food works were closed. There was nothing open. We were just cut off. But we were kept in the loop constantly, and I felt part of a community for the first time ever. And then as soon as it starts, where they've put up the postings about government assistance, straight away on the community notice boards, the welfare bashing's back. Now, the government's got it nicely set up that if somebody's renting in a house and they've just lost everything in the flood, they don't own that house, they don't qualify for the assistance because they're on income support. How cruel is that? Abbott government changed all the rules around disaster relief funding for families, And like we had Albanese come through here, I think it was Friday, and even he pointed out the disaster relief payments are being knocked back. People can't get the assistance because this government's cut it. You know, leaving people with nowhere to live. Some people were still without power in a couple of areas. Do you know what I mean? People who had lost everything because they may not have been flooded out, but the power was turned off to their streets. So they've lost all their food, and they've had to sit in the house with no power for 4 days, 5 days, and the government's saying, no, you're not eligible for that assistance just because you're on a DSP or whatever. One of my friends is in that situation. The house next door went under, hers didn't. And because she didn't sustain $20,000 worth of damage to her house, she can't get any assistance for sitting in the house for 4 days with no food, watching the water lap at her front door, basically. You know what I mean? It's disgusting. A lot of things need to change. But the trolls, I've got to the point I've lost the patience completely. The ignorance, I don't know whether it's ignorance. Some of it is plain narcissism. And I look at it this way. If you support cutting people off of Social Security, if you support cashless debit cards, then you support financial abuse, right? You support, okay, I'll get right to the nuts and bolts. But with the cashless debit card, if somebody says, oh, but, I say and I'm saying this on my TikTok videos a lot too. If you support the cashless debit card, then you support, in my opinion, the sale of Australians to a private company for profit. Since when do we sell our own people for profits? Okay, the free market trade includes human beings now and their families. I mean, that's despicable. So when, $13,000 is awfully cheap to sell an adult to a company, but it also takes in the control of their kids as well. And then they get paid monthly by the government to maintain that control over the 80% of that person's, well, it's not their income anymore, and you own that income as well, or that money, right? So when you say to me you support the cashless debit card, you support the sale of Australians to a private company, you're reducing Australians to commodities for profit. Right? You support financial domestic abuse because that's what it is. You support state-sanctioned abuse. You support segregation, right, and alienation and social exclusion, especially for the kids, because the kids are the ones that are being used, and they're being, oh, think of the children. Yeah, think of the children that are being bullied at school, missing out on stuff because the parents can't access cheaper stuff with cash, or they don't have the cash for the kids to partake, right? I get in trouble on TikTok all the time. I'm on another 2-day ban on my main account because I pulled another one up today, right? And I will keep pulling people up. I can still go live on my TikTok, and I did, and straight away I had a couple come in, well, get a job. Well, getting a job doesn't save you. Woolies and Coles love having casual staff that are on cashless debit cards. And when we look at it that way, let's take the idea. The idea for the cashless debit card comes from a miner, right? In the 17th century, miners used to pay their workers, okay? The mining bosses used to pay their workers with script, okay? Now, script was that you were given tokens with the company's name on, and you could only spend your tokens in the company stores. Does this sound familiar? So the wages of the workers, right, were paid in tokens. This comes from the mining industry of the 17th century. All right, and you're given the tokens, but you can only spend those tokens at the company stores, where the prices of the goods were elevated and higher, and the profits went back to the same mining company that you were employed by. Does this sound very familiar? The LMP treat Australian money as their own. They've set up a system that funnels your Social Security, or 80% of your Social Security money, to their mates' businesses. It's the same as script, but just on a really big scale. You know what I mean? And it annoys me. It really does. And it annoys me that people support this profiteering off of people's backs, off of the lowest paid workers that we've got, off of the sickest people we've got in the country, off of low income people. But worst of all, I try to remind these people, while you're having a go at me on TikTok, do you really wish this on your children as they come out of high school and they apply for their youth allowance to go to university or TAFE, or they're trying to get a job? Right? Because if you don't believe in handouts, then you're certainly not going to support your children when they turn 18. You're going to tell them that they have to get their own income and they have to do things their own way, and they have to pay rent at home and board and bills. So they have to go and apply for Social Security. Right? I always trip these people up, because what they're saying is they want it for me, right? But they don't understand that if they want it for me, they want it for their own children as well. Or you get the more conservative pensioners. They don't want it for them, but they forget. Do you want it for your grandkids? And I keep trying to say to people, would you really do this to your own mum? You know, say you're, and I'm only being hypothetical here, say you're a 30-year-old conservative and you don't believe in social welfare and you think it's all a handout and, it should be controlled, blah, blah, blah. And your 60-year-old mum can't work anymore and she's not well off, so she's on a job seeker payment trying to get through. Would you really do it to your mum? Really? Really? Would you really do that to your mum? And that's what I can't understand. There is people in our community that would. They're showing their stripes all over the place. They would do this to their own children. They would do this to their own parents. And they will do it to their own grandparents. Especially if there's $1 to be made. Or they've got the entitlement attitude of, my tax dollars, so I should be able to lord it all over you. They've been given this, I don't know, since the Howard government and the division where workers think that their level of privilege and entitlement can impede on someone else's life, right? And they don't care anymore. I mean, it's only since this government that has come in that you hear all of the get a job and all the abuse held at people on disabilities as well, and across the board to carers and parents. And it's just overwhelming some days. It gets very tiring. I can tell you that. It gets very tiring. Australians need to grow up. They need to get educated, and they need to understand what Social Security is for. Right? Simple as that. And they need to learn to protect it, because it's something that is for every Australian citizen. Right? I try and educate people. Everybody pays taxes. We pay excise taxes. We pay GST. We still pay state government, federal government, import, export duties, state taxes, the works. We pay every other tax apart from income tax. But then again, probably 40% of, there's 4,124,400 casual workers out there that claim a part payment on Social Security, right? Underemployed people who still claim benefits because the corporate sector love it. They've learned that from the US, where companies like Walmart can employ people and pay them such low wages that people have to rely on welfare payments and food packages to survive. Right? The corporates love that because they don't have to pay the wages. If they paid people livable wages, but that eats into my profits. Well, you'll generate more money if you give more people more money. If you pay your workers a livable income, they can afford to buy your product. They'll keep you in business. You'll make plenty of profit, but no. We can't have that, can we? So we've got to the point now we've got such a casualised workforce, gig economy, that people have no other alternative. Even if they're working 30 hours a week, and if they've got children, they still receive their part family tax benefits and payments. You know what I mean? But no. And all those people are at risk of being put on a cashless debit card, should it roll out, because they don't care. And that's what worries me as well, because then you end up with a situation where you've got work for the dole on income management. That's slavery in my opinion. But then you've got casual work. You're going to work, but you're still listed as a bludger and a druggie and everything, and you can't be trusted with your own income, because the other part of your income that's keeping you roof over your head, right, is going to be owned and controlled by a private company who's making a profit. You know? Yeah, so I just thought I'd come on with that, because people need to be educated. The Conservatives need to sit down and shut up and leave people alone. And if you're one of those people out there that truly feels that a person like myself on a DSP needs to be sold off, commodified, made a profit off of by wealthy people to do as they please and take away all my human rights, my statutory rights, my privacy, my freedom, I'm fighting against you on all levels, because I'm an Australian citizen and I have every right to be equally protected under the law and what you do. It doesn't matter whether you're a millionaire or whether you're a pauper. The law in this country should protect all Australians equally. And where it falls down here is laws have been bent to enable this cashless debit card to get through. Protections of Payments Act in the Social Security Act is a Commonwealth law. It hasn't been repealed, but people on the cashless debit card are exempted from its protection. There's your first legal protection gone, right? Every other person out there who's not on a cashless debit card is completely protected under consumer law in this country. But not if you're on a cashless debit card. You're not protected by consumer law, because Indu has a letter of no action and is protected against any form of litigation, and they're not accountable or responsibility for any loss or hardship or financial hardship they cause you, because they've got their little letter, because they're protected and you've lost your consumer rights. All right? Privacy rights. It appears that Services Australia can throw your information around everywhere, including your bank details. They have no qualms in sharing it with Indu without your consent, and all of your other information. Your statutory rights. That's the right to remain silent, and that's the right to non-disclosure. Everybody else in this country has it, including a convicted murderer that's sitting in jail. But you don't have it if you're on a cashless debit card, because if you don't front with all the documents that they demand, and your bank statements for the last 2 years, and your kids' school attendance records for the last 2 years, and your medical this and that and everything else, statutory rights have been removed. If you fail to present what they want, they just won't let you off the card at all. And they deem you incompetent when you haven't been to court, right? We had one card holder, her son was autistic. He couldn't use his card. They really went to town on this lady. She had NDIS funding for him, right? They wanted proof of capacity. $5,000 later. $5,000 she had to spend to get a capacity assessment done on her son, right? And then to get him through to psychiatrists and pay the $500 per appointment, and then get the reports written, right? In order for them to let her autistic son off the card. Because he didn't have capacity to use it, but they didn't care. They didn't care. And it's against the law for her to use it for him. You know? So, I think we need to keep on about what is Social Security about. We need to fight to protect it. We need to stand up and fight for the dignity of people on Social Security. We're Australians. That's it. We're Australians. We didn't ask the free market to come in and dissolve all of our businesses and all of our factories over the last 30 years. We didn't ask the LNP to challenge General Motors Holdings in South Australia to leave, right, because they didn't want to support the car industry, because they didn't want to support 200,000 jobs at risk. How much tax has been lost on the revenue of those 200,000 workers that are now out of work from all of the different ancillary companies that went down when Holden's left? How much revenue has this country lost because somebody couldn't see the value investing money into that company to keep all those other companies afloat with their workers and their taxes that they would all be paying and all their GST and all their excises? How much revenue has this country lost by losing the car industry? And by not supporting the car industry, right, we watched General Motors Holden go down, we watched Ford Motor Company go down, we watched Toyota go, and we no longer have no motor manufacturing in this country. But we have places like Elizabeth in South Australia, and we have, which are ripe for the picking for the cashless debit card, and we have places like Geelong in Victoria that are also ripe for the picking, where people who'd been working for 30 years lost everything. Are sitting on job seeker. How many people have lost their homes for not being able to pay their mortgages? They don't care. We've got to have a change of government no matter what. This country cannot go on doing this to its people. All right? A country cannot function when only the 10 top % are the beneficiaries and everybody else is being thrown to the wolves. Simple as that. And we're watching Scott Morrison throw us all to the wolves. And he's done that over and over again. All right? Doing it through our social security system, robo-debt, cashless debit cards, work for the dole programs, right? Let's demean all the poor people and the casual workers. But now he's doing it with our health system, right? Chunking away at Medicare, making it so that the majority of us can't access medical care, right? We can't afford it on benefits. We can't afford to go to see a specialist. So we can't get the preventative care that we need because most of the preventative surgeries or preventative Medicare has been removed off the PBS and we can't afford it. So people fronting up for cancer now are fronting up with stage 4 and it's non-reversible, whereas before, under a Labor government, you could have gone and nipped it in the bud at stage 1, or as it was a cluster of cells or something like that. But to get that sort of preventative care, not anymore. And it's only going to get worse. And you've only got to see. I like the saying that I've seen this last week. Scotty doesn't hold a hose and he doesn't give a rat's. And that's being shown. The contempt for the Australian public and the average Australian worker and the low-income people and the vulnerable people in this country are being thrown to the wolves. All right? Labor will stop the cashless debit card. They're not perfect. They're not the saviours of the planet. But they're certainly downright better than the LNP, One Nation, right, who are nationalist, right-wing Christian conservatives. You can watch your women's rights go out the window with her, right? She'll turn this into Texas Taliban if she got a chance. And I'm talking about women's reproductive rights services. LGBTQIA rights will be going out the window if people elect a far right-wing conservative religious nut jobs, right? That's what they're going to get. Clive Palmer, he's only interested in his mines. That's all he's interested in, is getting his mines, getting approvals for more mines, dig it up, take it away, doesn't have to pay any mining taxes, doesn't have to pay any fuel excises, can rip the country blind. He doesn't care about people, right? Him and his little freedom movement, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but I don't see what he's going to do for people on the bottom of the ladder to lift them up. He didn't even pay his workers in Townsville still, right? He had so much contempt for his workers that he left them hanging and the government had to bail them out. You know what I mean? He still hasn't paid people. Don't forget. And you've got Ricardo Bossi sprouting, he'll ban Islam. That's his #1 policy. Hang on. It takes a lot more than the country, trying to ban a religion when it's in our constitution that freedom of religion and it's international human rights have freedom of religion. And I don't mean the religious discrimination bill. That needs to go in the bin. We don't want the freedom to discriminate against people who LGBTQIA or people with disabilities just because your religious beliefs think you can. We don't want all that, right? Yeah, it's just ridiculous. But what is Ricardo Bossi offering apart from anti-Islam rhetoric, nationalistic right-wing rhetoric? I don't see him having any healthcare policies, social security policies, public school policies, public housing, Medicare. None of these right wings are mentioning any of the important infrastructure that our society needs. Have you noticed that? Not one of them. Not even LNP. Right? This is what you've got to be aware of. Those people, I call them lambs to the slaughter. If they continue to carry on that and they take their votes through, they'll either end up with more Morrison or we'll end up with people who haven't got a bloody clue on how to run a country at all. All right? We don't want that. So we need to vote Labor to stop that. Because Labor will... And, of course, Greens, Australian Progressives. You need those sort of parties in the Parliament to protect Australian people, ordinary people. Because we're not the 10% up the top that can lord it around and drink and drink and drink and take their chosen recreational substances. Do you know what I mean? We're not that crowd. And I really don't want to ever be that crowd. Do you? Because they live in a different realm. They have no idea what it's like down here on the ground. They don't know what it's like to work 40 and 60 hours a week on lower wages and then get into your 50s and your body's packed up, and they don't care. We're commodities to them to be made a profit off of. Right? Corporations see workers as units, and when your unit is burnt out, throw it away and get a new one. Okay? And try and get out of it without paying any workers' compensation along the way, because your unit is now too tired or too broken to work. And it's a disgusting situation we've got to. The year is 2021. We need to get people educated about pulling their heads out of the 17th century, and in some cases the 14th century. Right? People need to come into the year 2021 and grow up. Simple as that. You know? Okay, Gap. Waste of time. He's not going to do anything. He's trying to run on the sovereign citizen and all the common law crap that's not relevant to us. Right? That just all that revotes to is LNP votes. If people vote Gap, it ends up going to the LNP. IMOP, well, they're following Clive Palmer and all of those. That vote will end up with the LNP. Simple as that. Do you know what I mean? Pauline Hanson's vote, even though she might not put them down as the number 2, right? Because she's sticking to glue with Campbell Newman and the Liberal Democrats, the vote will end up with the LNP. Not directly. What will happen is the votes that go to those parties are votes that are not going to Labor. So therefore, and they're votes that are not going to Greens. So therefore, or they're not going to Australian Progressives. Those votes, by those votes not going to the party that we need in power, stops the party from getting into power and keeps the LNP in power. So people need to understand. They need to learn. They're not voting in their best interest because they're following what I call Pied Pipers. Pied Pipers who want their votes because that's how they make their money, right? That's all they're after is the cash for the votes. They don't care about the people. All you've got to do is go and look at how they vote for you.org.au and look up how Pauline Hanson has voted, how Craig Kelly has voted, how the Liberal National members have voted, right? Look up at what Clive Palmer voted for in 2014. And bear in mind, and I don't mean this in a nasty way now, but Jackie Lambie was Palmer United Party. Remember when she gave the vote to start the cashless debit card off in Ceduna in 2016? Since becoming her own person of Jackie Lambie Network and got away from Clive Palmer and Twiggy Forrest and Minderoo, finally, right, she voted against the card, and she's made it clear that if they bring another bill forward, she will not support the card again. She has made that clear, right? But under Palmer United Party, which is Clive Palmer, who at the same time, when we went to the federal election last time, Clive Palmer got on television in the Hinkler region saying he doesn't support the cashless debit card. It's against the Constitution. It's against human rights. He didn't have a clue what he was talking about, right? He just kept saying he was against the card because he was trying to get the votes of people who were against the card so that they wouldn't vote for Labor or Greens, right? And this time around we've got Australian progressives too that, so we've got this situation where we're up against that again. And Clive Palmer's already, I had somebody on the phone that's on that side of the fence letting me know that Clive Palmer's going to do a whole great big campaign in Hinkler, right, to try and get forced cashless debit card holders to vote for the UAP because he's going to stop the card. No, he's not. Because if that was the case, when it was Palmer United Party, remember parties vote party line, he would have told Jackie Lambie not to vote for the card in the first place because she was Palmer United Party. She was his senator in the Senate. He would have turned around and said to her, don't vote for that, I don't support it. But he didn't, did he? He didn't stop it then. But unfortunately, the only thing you'll see on Clive Palmer's voting record is mining. Votes for mining legislations and votes to stop the mining tax. Okay? That's all you'll see. That the rest of the time he was either asleep. There's plenty of photos online you can look up, right? Okay, of Clive Palmer asleep in the House of Reps, or he wasn't there. And you look at all the other stuff, he was absent. Right? His front man Craig Kelly supports the cashless debit card. Of course he does. He voted for it with the party or under AUP. I have to look it up because he's UAP now, right? I can't remember whether he was an independent because he just quit from the LNP or he was part of the LNP or UAP. Either which way, he voted with the government to extend and expand the card to the Northern Territory on the 9th of December 2020. Craig Kelly supports the cashless debit card, right? GAP is pseudo-law party, and Rudd Cullerton was disqualified from Parliament, right? I mean, he even went as far as to apply to the Queen of England to interfere, which she cannot. He wants us back under British rule. Yeah, and votes that go to his party, he's never been able to get a seat anyway. So they're just wasted votes. They really are. They're wasted votes. Yeah, Labor and Greens will stop the card, but Labor needs to be in power in the House of Reps to really stop it. All right? So, yeah. Anyway, guys, I thought I'd just have a chat. I think the trolls are getting me down a little bit. Not in the same way as they used to. They just remind me that there's people in our community that would like to see a person like me sitting in the gutter dying rather than enable me to have a livable income where I could buy my food and pay my rent and have heating and cooling and have access to medical. And that gets me down sometimes, to know that there's actually people in this community that not only would do that to myself, but they would do it to my child in a heartbeat. They would do it to your children. They would do it to your parents. They'll do it to your grandparents because they've got this privileged entitlement attitude that they're better than you, and that's wrong, and that is so wrong, and it gets tiring sometimes, and it's very depressing, and our kids feel it. They feel it through the way they're treated, through the job agencies, where they're treated through everything is based on comply, right? And they wonder why our kids are not as resilient as the way we were when we were kids and teenagers, is because our kids are being mentally smashed before they even get out into the world. Now, to take over their finances before they've even learned how to do finances, will end up with the same situation you've got with the basics card, where you've got a whole generation of people that become welfare dependent because they don't know any better. And it's not their fault, and we don't need to do that. And Indu's sitting there going, oh, right? And you've got, at the moment, NT credit unions going, oh, goody, we've got these people under our control. And that's all it's about. It's profits for wealthy people and control. And it's, meanwhile, your capacity, your fiduciary rights, your human rights, Article 9's being absolutely trampled, right, of your kids or your parents that are already on it, people with disabilities and their carers. And it's wrong. And it needs to be nipped in the bud, or not, it needs to be completely gone. Albanese said on the Marcus Paul radio show, I think it was March last year, they will scrap the card, they will cancel the contract with Indu, and they would do an investigation into the company and what was going on. Because a lot of people have lost a lot of money as well, and they never got it back. They're treated with appalling behaviour. They're treated like dirt. And it's worse if you're Aboriginal, you're treated even worse. The racism in this country, it leaches through everything. All right, and that has to change as well. You know, I got banned because I replied to a comment on an Aboriginal TikToker, a creator on TikTok who is fair-skinned, who cops a lot of abuse, and they were saying that she was a dole bludger and blah, 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 and all this. And I jumped in, and of course, whoever that troll was reported my account for harassing and bullying. And it's like, I only set him straight on stuff. And then when I went on my live on TikTok earlier, I had a couple smartasses come into my account, and I got called a slag, and I get, oh, get a job, you bludger, this, that, and all the other. I was like, oh, I just ban them. On TikTok, I can speak more freely than I do here. I have no patience left. If people come onto my TikTok live, or they come into my comment sections on my videos on my TikToks, I'll give them what for, because I'm not putting up with it. I'm a person. I'm a human being. I'm not the, excuse the French, I'm not the shit on the bottom of somebody's shoe, thank you very much. Right? Yeah, I can't afford much. I don't do hair and makeup because I can't afford it. Right? I make do with the clothes that I've got. I make do with the food that I've got. I'm not a greedy person. Right? And I've learned to live very basically. Right? But when even the basics, even my pension's not covering that, there's something wrong. So for people on youth allowance on $359 a fortnight, how the hell are they surviving? And some youth are getting even less because it's based on if their parents are working, their youth allowance is based on what their parents' income is. Right? And job seeker, it's still not livable at $620 a fortnight. It's not. Not when you've got a housing crisis and every Airbnb and every greedy person out there is capitalising, kicking people out of homes, families, good families, working families and non-working families, disabled people and elderly people, right, kicking them out because, see, when you're on your lease, they can only put the rent up $10 or $20 every time you sign a new lease. But if you kick a person out, you can get a whole new lease done and put the rent up by $100, $150 a week. Why don't you? The capitalism that's going on at the moment is going to backfire hugely. But, I mean, we've got so many homeless people and families. All right? Hopefully that'll break the stereotype that goes with being homeless. Remember, the homeless was the bloke in the trench coat with his beer in a brown paper bag type thing. Well, it ain't that way. We've got too many families in tents, all right? There's no ceiling on rent increases. And this is where Europe is really good. Europe allow things like a 10-year lease so that people have got security. But there's a rent cap, so you can't cash in and screw them blind. Do you know what I mean? And there's a lot of property investors and a lot of people who own homes that rent to people on welfare, as I get told, that have this attitude and look down at people. It's like, hang on a minute, the people you have in your rental properties are paying your mortgage. So you get to own that property for free. You didn't, you know, you may have laboured to get the first mortgage for your house, right? But then once you got enough equity in your house to buy a second house, and then you get somebody in to pay the rent, which is paying your mortgage and the mortgage on the property that you've bought. That's not earning money in the sense of working for it, because you're playing the numbers game, and the more properties you own, the more free money you've got coming in to pay off those mortgages. And then once you've got them all paid off, you're a millionaire, you've got loads of assets, but you didn't actually earn it by going to work for an hourly rate. You know what I mean? And most of the people, if they're on Social Security, you're getting 50, 70, 80% of their Social Security payment, and then you have the audacity to turn around and call them bludgers, because you're the beneficiary. You're where their money ends up. You know what I mean? You're the beneficiary of that Social Security payment. Cheeky, isn't it? It's really, really disgusting. And I'm over it. People who, yeah, and they say, but I worked really hard for my house. Yeah, for your one house. And you managed to get negative gearing and every other scam under the book and get everybody else to pay for all your other houses. It's called passive income. Yeah, they don't earn it. It earns itself. That's right. But they don't see it that way. They think they've earned it, and they haven't. It's earned itself. I mean, 25, 30 years ago, I thought of doing the same thing myself, but unfortunately I wasn't with the right person to be able to do it. But I wouldn't have done it the way some people were. I lived in one house where the owners had 60 houses, and the house I was living in, the 17-year-old son, this was his first purchase, and I found out he paid $25,000 using a personal loan, and then within a month of getting into that house, he got another bank out to assess it, and they valued it at $52,000. He had $27,000 instantly in free equity, and first thing he did was go to another bank and buy another house, and he was buying ex-housing trust houses, right, because he had $27,000 in equity, and they was getting the houses for between $17,000 and $25,000 a pop. So he goes and buys another one with the equity on the first one, and he's already got two, and his mortgage was $113 a month for both, and he was renting them out for $500 a month. How's that? Set for life when you're 17 years of age. Better than playing the stock market, eh? Who knows how many he ended up with. Negative gearing from the Howard government, that was just cherry on the top, isn't it? But it's cost a lot. And I mean, we've got severe housing crisis. And then you've got Indu, who is a barrier to people getting housing because they've stopped people from being able to pay rents properly or on time, and owners won't touch people on the Indu cashless debit card if they can avoid it. So there's another barrier. You know, it's just ridiculous. So over the past 2 years or two, yeah, the agents have clamped right down on the 30% rule, so that your rent can't be more than 30% of your income. So the result is there is no longer any affordable rentals for anybody on any Social Security payments in this country. And I think it's disgusting to expect families to room share, you know, with strangers. I think it's disgusting. Or sleep in your car or get a tent, and then you end up getting moved on all the time because there's nowhere safe for you to put your tent. Yeah, I'm over it. It's, what has Australia become? It's far from the lucky country, all right, and we need to change that. So educate people about the card people, and if you get somebody who pipes up and goes, welfare bludger, this, that, smack them one for me, okay? Not physically, but you know what I mean? Because I'm over it. I'm over being constantly told I am a lesser citizen and that I shouldn't have home and I shouldn't be able to eat, and how dare I have a cigarette, you know, and I shouldn't be allowed to go out for dinner, or I shouldn't be allowed to go to the movies, I shouldn't be allowed to have a life of any kind. some of the trolls, their ideas of what people on Social Security should be allowed to have is disgusting. We don't treat criminals, we don't treat prisoners this way. Well, we do, but it's behind closed doors. But I can tell you now, we treat refugees like this. And I always said at the beginning, you want to know how a country's going to treat its people, if it's going to treat people bad? Watch how they treat the refugees. And that's how they'll treat you. And that's exactly what they're doing. Okay? Not exactly the same. I mean, the refugees have been locked up for 9 years for no reason. But people are being put on cashless debit cards and condemned for life for no reason as well. Criminalised, and they haven't broken the law. They haven't done anything wrong. We just have a nasty government. A very nasty government. And we have 4 more months, guys, and we can vote them out. Let's hope we can vote Labour in, all right? If you're still Greens, still need Greens in the Senate, all right? Australian Progressives. But please, the rest of them, don't get sucked in. Don't get sucked in. Right-wing trolls want us back to Victorian England, and they want workhouses for the poor. And don't think they don't, because they do. Pauline Hanson, I can't remember. I don't care if it was her idea of a joke or satire, but talking about work camps out in the bush for people on welfare to go out and kill cane toads for 10 cents each to earn their welfare. Pauline, seriously? But then again, we've watched Pauline dismantle the family law court. She hates single women with a passion. She can't handle single women. And in her eyes, all women are liars when it comes to domestic violence. She's a woman who hates women. And she would vote against protecting women's rights because she's also pro-life. So therefore, she's going to vote against protecting women's reproductive health rights. You know, we could end up with Taliban Texas. Really? We don't want that sort of stuff. And everything that's been worked for the last 100 years, if we let them get away with more work for the dole programs, that dismantles over 100 years of hard-won rights at work, in the workplace, okay? And everything that the suffragettes and everything, people have died fighting for those rights. And I'm not just talking about during the wars either. I'm talking about on work sites. People have died fighting for the protections that we have today. Everything has to be protected now. Everything. Right? And the trolls can all sod off as far as I'm concerned. I know who I am. I don't have any money to give anybody, right? And I can't work physically and earn profits for a corporation anymore and take away an hourly wage. But what I have got to give is my time, and that's how I contribute. And that's what I've got to give. I care. And that's all I've got to give. And that's what I will give to my community, to people, to help people on the cashless debit card, and to fight this policy. And with that, I'm going. See you guys. Bye.